The Radical, Fundamental Principles of Freedom, Rational Self-Interest, and Individual Rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, December 8th. And I am really pleased to have Jean with me, Jean Moroney, who's been a frequent guest in the past. So welcome, Jean.
Thank you, Yaron. Always fun to talk with you.
Good. I'm looking forward to this one. And reminder to everybody, feel free to ask questions. Super chat is open, and Jean will be taking questions on the topics we're going to cover today, but just anything you guys come up with, generally in the realm of Jean's expertise, which I think most of you are familiar with. Just to give you a quick rundown, Jean teaches ambitious people with challenging goals how to manage their minds so they make better decisions, set goals, and motivate and focus their thoughts for action. And she's the founder and president of Thinking Directions. You can learn more about the work, access resources, or join her programs on her website, thinkingdirections.com. Thinkingdirections.com. Great. All right. Well, this is, I love this season between kind of Thanksgiving and Christmas is a great time. I think things seem to slow down a little bit, and a lot more time to plan and to think. It's perfect for like getting you going for next year and thinking about next year, thinking about what worked and what didn't work during the previous year, kind of setting yourself up for the next year. So what's the importance of if you will doing that, of kind of setting goals in advance, of thinking through, spending a lot of time on really thinking through where you are in life generally, or in your career, or whatever it happens to be?
Yes. Well, I think long-term goals are really essential to happiness. This is not the most obvious case of this is a central purpose, which integrates your life. But all long-range goals are really the source of the deepest joy you get is from the things that you build and you see as a result of your life and of your choice and of your having, in effect, created something out of your own imagination as to how the world is going to be or how your life is going to be or the environment you're going to give your kids or whatever it is. And there's really nothing more gratifying than being able to look back over the last 10 years or 20 years and say, wow, that was an idea in my mind and look what I've done.
Yep. So, I mean, obviously achieving those goals is something essential, necessary for happiness. But there are lots of people out there that seem to achieve those goals. Like, I know people, Silicon Valley, they take companies public and they make a lot of money and the companies do well. So it's not just about the money. And that might happen when they're very young even, and they kind of lose it. They lose focus. They lose the sense of purpose. So they've achieved amazing things, and yet they don't achieve the happiness that one assumes that they will. What's going on?
Right. It's necessary for happiness, but not sufficient. Right. There's no substitute for a rational morality. If you think of like the Zappos founder, the story of his life where he died in a fire, after his life went completely crazy after he sold out, he didn't have any compass. Now, sometimes I think entrepreneurs do have a compass while they're building the business because they really do have a creative, rational goal, or creative, rational, real world goal. And they take that as the whole thing, and that guides them. And because it's rational, they do well. But in order to then set what the next goal is, you need a rational philosophy. You need to have rational goals. It's only rational goals that can really bring you joy. And to really get happiness, you need to have integrated goals, and that's not possible if they're rational. That's not possible unless you understand the principles of rationality and you understand why they're needed for happiness.
So does that mean, I mean, it can't mean that you have to be an objectivist to, to be successful in life. We know plenty of people who are successful who are not. So what is it that really is needed for them?
Well, I actually think the people who are successful, and there are lots of people who are, I would say, successful and happy, who are
Yep.
not objectivists.
Yeah.
And if you talk with them, they do have an implicitly rational philosophy. And they are probably, they may have some talk around the edges, like they may pay lip service to religion in some respects.
Yep.
But, and to the extent that they take any of that seriously, they will not be happy,
Yep.
right? They will be compartmentalized. In any area where they accept subjectivism. I mean, Hank Rearden is the fictional dramatization of this, right? I mean, he was essentially a happy guy as long as he didn't have to think about his family, right?
Yes, as long as he didn't go home. As long as he didn't
As
go
long as he
home.
didn't go home, right? Yeah. I mean, and it was dramatic, but this is real. And if they've pushed that off to the edges sufficiently, it can be not an actual big part of their lives. I do think that puts an upper limit on how much achievement you can have. I mean, I don't think that people with really huge achievements can be also hugely happy if they don't have a pretty logical, explicit philosophy. And if they don't understand something about selfishness, altruism is a killer.
Yep.
If you are committed to altruism, and I've spent 35 years trying to get altruism out of myself. Even a small amount of altruism will make you miserable.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I think you need to keep in mind is that the fact that people say they're happy and they put smiles on their faces doesn't mean,
Sure.
you really need to look behind the scenes where you can't look because it's private.
Yep.
Yeah. So did that answer your question? Because, I got one other answer to your question.
Yeah.
So the other answer to your question I have is the common sense way that I think people stay rational is that they stay value oriented. And that's the way I would put it, which is that you always think in terms of the value you want to create instead of the threat you want to avoid, or you're always thinking in terms of the positive you want to create. And to the extent that you do that consistently, again, if you're always on a creation premise, those are going to be consistent and you will be essentially rational. And that is in self-help books and things, there is an implicit value orientation in some of the self-help books, but they also have a lot of garbage, which to the extent you let the garbage in, it's going to undercut.
I mean, this is why this seems to be a flavor of the week self-help book, because people do them, they get some benefit from it, but it doesn't actually cure them. It doesn't really move them forward. So they're looking for the next gimmick.
Yeah, and that's actually part of the problem. That's something I had to figure out for myself, is that they are looking for something that is going to cure them. And that is part of the problem. If you think that you're broken and you need to be fixed, this is a permanent problem with being happy. And, I haven't finished reading Tara Smith's book on egoism without permission, but she makes this incredibly important point in that book. She says that, in effect, your commitment to your happiness is the authority for ethics, right? And that the reason that you need ethics is because you're committed to happiness, and therefore you need a moral code, which, I hadn't heard it explained that way before. It was really, really, I mean, this is an original point that I really appreciate Tara pointing out. And if you don't have that idea, you can have something that's telling you that you're not good enough. Like if you have an idea of morality that's separate from happiness, you can still be saying, well, I'm not happy because I'm not being moral enough, or it's all right that I'm not happy because this is the right thing to do. There will be some kind of conflict between those two things.
Yeah.
And if you think that you are like broken and need to be fixed, you're putting morality above happiness. The truth is that you can be rational at whatever psychology you have, you can be rational now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can improve. And so pride is moral ambition, so you can improve. So you can be rational now and you can increase your skills and your abilities. And that's the source of happiness. So there is
You don't have
no
to, you're
fit.
saying you don't have to solve all your psychological problems
Yes,
before you can be happy.
right, right. It's actually the process of solving them is a happy process and should be a happy process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So as we set goals for next year, or as we set goals generally, what's the most, where can we expect to be successful? That is, what are the predictors of actually being successful or attaining those goals?
Yeah. Well, the most important thing is your degree of desire for them. This is really true. The more passionate you are about the goal, the more likely it is you're going to keep going until you get it. And if you have a goal that's do it or die trying, you'll keep working on it, over decades. Now, that's actually not such a satisfying answer. I mean, I think that's true. But it's not such a satisfying answer because that limits you a little bit by what your current values are and what your current motivation is. And so one of the things that I've worked on, so the second thing that is a predictor is, do you have a process whereby you can pursue the goal with the motivation you have and build the strength of your passion for it as you go? I think that is really critical, because if it's at all a long-range goal, if it's a year or 2 years or 3 years, you're going to need to put in a lot of effort. And the way I look at it is you have to make sure that the process by which you're pursuing the goal is paying off as it goes, so you're getting some joy along the way. So you're reinforcing that value, you're seeing the benefit, you're getting excited about it, you're building momentum, and that's what gets you to keep going. So like if we were talking about entrepreneurs, this is one of the reasons they need a minimum viable product. They need a proof that there's actually a market and that they can make this thing and, and at least provide some value, and then they can iterate and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And the same thing is true. The way I teach it, I call it planned evolution. You take the biggest goal, you can take the absolute biggest goal, you can take a 30-year goal, and you need to be able to figure out what you're going to do in this 2-week period.
Yep.
That you can actually do in 2 weeks, that you are morally certain you can do, want to do, and will do in the next 2 weeks. And when you can bring it in that short, and I think 2 weeks is actually a magic number. If you can bring it into that short, then you can actually do it. Then it's just an issue of figuring out, how do I put in the time? And if you have motivational problems, solving the motivational problems on something that you can do for something that has a really big payoff, so you're willing to put in the effort to solve any motivational problems you have. And then you can grow your values.
So make sure that you're really passionate about it, and then break it down into kind of bits that you can be equally passionate about each one of them, that are shorter duration, that you can actually achieve in the short run and get that satisfaction, so that you can keep the motivation going.
Yes, and sometimes you can do that just because of your existing knowledge and values. And sometimes you need a process to help you figure that out. That's what I teach. That's like
the process.
That's the kind of thing that I teach. That's the kind of thing I coach people on, because it's not, I mean, it took me 15 years to develop that process. You can figure it out yourself. I did. and like the lean process, the Lean Startup by Eric Rice is a book for startups. And I would say that's a very similar process, but it's in entrepreneurial. And then, experiments, it's a similar process. Or in writing, where you do drafts, you figure it out and you iterate. There is one process that's out there, but sometimes figuring it out for your particular goal takes a little bit of creativity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And How ambitious do you think people's goals should be?
I think the sky's the limit. I think generally
That's scary,
speaking,
isn't it? I mean, that's super
yeah,
scary.
it is scary because when you set a goal, it means that you could fail. And if you don't put in the work, you will fail and you will feel guilty. When you set a goal, it's very exciting and it's like you get some happiness on credit. You get some of the pleasure of having achieved the goal because you set it and you imagine what it will be like. And it's really pleasurable to imagine, right? But then if you then drop that goal, then there's some real mourning associated with it because that you've blasted those expectations and it's very painful. And I think that's why people are afraid to set goals because they've set them without setting them realistically in some way, or they've set them without being committed. And so they've dropped them. And so the problem is not how ambitious your goal is. It's do you have a process that you can be confident that you will stay at it? And if not, then you should set a less ambitious goal and learn a process where you can stay at it. And then the sky's the limit.
So, so if you set a simpler goal, is that like a step towards the bigger goal, like you described earlier?
That's what I recommend.
You still have that ambitious goal out there. You're just taking steps.
You're not as committed to it, right? The thing you really wind up committing to is the shorter term thing that you can commit to. I think that's a big part of it is that, and the other thing is that when you set, like, let me give an example here. This personal example, I assume it's all right. I basically went into psychoepistemology. I was interested in understanding, in fact, how do you think? What is the interaction between the conscious mind and the automatic functions of memory and affect, right? And for cognition. And I was not interested in emotional stuff. In fact, the first wasn't until about 8 or so years into my business, I suddenly realized, I'm talking a lot about overload, but I should say something about emotional overload. That might make sense, right? And then it like opened up and I realized you can't really understand a thinking process without understanding how emotions work and how to manage them. That's actually a really important part of the process. I had a total blinder on. I had no idea this was part of it. And in a sense that my goal has widened as a result of that. And it's gone down channels that I didn't expect it to go because I was following my nose. And so one of the things you need to be open to when you set a long range goal is that you need to be willing to have it be somewhat flexible. You set a long range direction, but then you actually don't know what exactly is possible. And so you need to be able to go a little more abstract. Like, I'm interested in how the mind works. Okay, managing emotions, that's part of how the mind works. It's all right. It's like the umbrella got a little bigger. That's okay. But then the goal also got a little harder because I'm now working on thinking, feeling, and action. I'm interested in all three of them. So, okay, it changed the scope, but it didn't change the overall direction. And it didn't mean that I didn't see progress. It did change sometimes this changes the timeline. So that's the other thing that you need is you never have to continue a long-term goal. But a coach who's been very helpful to me, a woman named Brooke Castillo, one of the things she says is, she says it in a subjectivist way. She says, it's all right to give up on the goal, but you need to like your reasons. And so, for example, if you've actually decided you are more interested in this other area, well, that's an excellent reason to change your goal.
So it's not so much as giving up. It's giving up on the particular goal, but it's not giving up on ambitious goals.
Exactly. Right. And it's figuring out what you care about the most, or having your values change, or going to a new phase. I mean, I think every 10 years or so, you do need to make a shift. I bet I know you've seen shifts in your career every 10 years or 15 years or so, right?
No, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I once had a conversation with actually the venture capitalists who gave the money to Zappos to make Zappos.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Don Valentine, who was like a legendary venture capitalist for Sequoia Capital, and he said every 10 years you should change what you do. Every 10, you gotta refresh, you gotta do something different because it just it you need to stay ambitious, you need to stay curious and flexible. And once you go over 10 years in the same thing, you kind of too much set in a given pattern. Uh,
Yeah. You're not growing anymore.
yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not growing anymore. Too much of it is just same old, same old. And that's, I mean, I do think that it's interesting. Pride is one of the virtues and it's moral ambitiousness. But I actually think you need ambitiousness across the board. I think that, continuous self-improvement, not just that you're getting better morally, but that you're actually developing skill. And it almost doesn't matter where you're developing skill, but you need to continually be doing that.
Yeah, in every aspect of your life. I mean, why
Yeah.
would you want to be mediocre in anything in a part of your life? You want to keep pushing yourself and being ambitious
Yeah,
in
and you
every
need to
aspect.
choose because
Yeah, you can't do everything.
you can't do everything all at once. You can do something in every area, but usually serially,
Yeah.
not in
Yeah.
parallel. And you do need to keep. I mean, it's a classic thing, right? Older people have trouble with technology. It's because they've automatized all the earlier technology, and it actually gets harder. You have to de-automatize something and automatize something new, and it's not a piece of cake to do that.
Yep.
I think us older people, I will put myself in that category, get a little bit of a hard time for this, but it is, and then is that your priority, right? Well, at a certain point, it does need to be your priority because otherwise the world just passes you by, right?
I think it's easier for us than previous generations because we've lived through many, many technological changes. It's something we've had to do constantly as we grew up, and so it's just a continuation. Whereas if you think about people before computers and after computers, I mean
It's a big
a
shift,
big
but
change.
I mean, I see a huge gulf between me and the digital natives because, oh my God, I am a paper kind of girl and I don't function. If I don't have paper and pencil, I am not functional. And
Done
that's
with.
becoming,
Yeah, I'm done with paper for the most part. But yeah,
well,
I
I congratulate you.
yeah. No, but there's no question. Young people can do stuff on their computers, can do stuff with technology that I can't.
Yeah,
And I don't, and the areas where I'm ambitious when it comes to technology and the areas where I'm not.
exactly right. And
There's
that you
only
do
so
have to
much time you
choose.
have.
Yeah. And then you delegate the other stuff, right?
Yeah, but Harry was telling us he's still programming.
Yes. Well, he's doggedly determined in that regard.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I haven't programmed in 40 years, I think, or 30 years. It's been a long time.
Yep.
So setting ambitious goals, really, really important, and you need to keep at it. Um, do you see people who have kind of given up on that, and what happens, when people do give up on setting ambitious goals?
Well, I mean, the people who are attracted to my stuff are mostly not people who have given up.
Yep.
And
Harry says he doesn't admit it though. I guess the programming.
um,
Let it slip. Yeah.
uh, so the thing I would say is, so I think you see this as a stereotype of the person who, I mean, think of like the stereotype of like a pack rat, right? This
Yep.
person has given up on even just having a house that's livable, right? I'm thinking about the crazy shows they have where the people have all this stuff that digging out their house it's a garbage dump in their house. They've really given up even just having a normal life, which is just a tragedy. Now that's an extreme case of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, in these but I think it's a dramatic example because if that happens, the person has a smaller and smaller existence, literally. I mean, like the space in their house gets filled up, and there's only this much room that they can even move in. It's a tragic situation, but I think people do that in their lives too. I think about like, for example, some people that I've actually been able to help, but I'm thinking of one person who was really feeling locked in on his job because he wasn't getting interesting work. And eventually, by talking with him about it and having to figure out what he wanted, he actually talked to his boss, and they figured out something he could do where he didn't have to go get a new job, and that he was doing something he really wanted to do. But he had been locked in for years. I mean, it was something like 10 years that he'd been locked in doing things that he didn't want to do, more and more unhappy with his job. You become miserable.
Yeah.
And part of the problem with this kind of thing is it's totally threat oriented. You're only seeing what's wrong with your life. That means that you keep avoiding threats. That's why it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And you start thinking that's the way the world is. And this is how people develop a malevolent universe premise, is that they have some bad situation that they don't know how to deal with, so they retrench, and then some other bad things come up, so they retrench from that. And before you know it, they live such a small life that they don't even realize the world is open to them. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I think continual growth is so important. It's part of what forces is not the right word, but it's one of the ways you keep recommitting to values and recommitting to finding the way forward as opposed to withdrawing.
How do you get people to overcome the fear factor? Because I mean, that clearly is what drags people down. They're afraid to leave their job because maybe they won't find a new one, or they're afraid to talk to their boss because maybe he'll take it the wrong way. Fear seems to be a driving emotion that holds people back and reduces their ambition.
Well, only if they're emotionalists. I mean, that's actually something that I think people don't realize quite what a subjectivist age we're in. People do think fear is what's holding them back. But fear is just an emotion. It's an alert that there's something that is a threat to you, something that you don't want to have happen. And that is just a value in disguise. It means there's something you're longing for, and the solution to fear is to actually face the fears. The worst thing you can do is to just say, well, that's a fear and I need to avoid it. That is the absolute worst thing you do. You need to face it and figure out, first of all, is it actually true? Like in this case I was telling you about, once this guy actually talked to his boss, a lot of his fears were not true. Yeah. But it took courage to actually figure out what he wanted and to start fighting for his values. Mm-hmm. And but any fear, anything you're afraid of, the actual cause of that fear is some value that is threatened. But it takes extra steps to figure out what the value is. The fear just points you at the threat. It does not point you at the value. Whereas, love points you at the value. You're thinking about, you love your wife. Yeah. Points you right at the value. You think of desire for something you want, points you right at what you want to desire. Pride, it's like it points you directly to what you're proud about. But that's not true of the threat-oriented emotions. Mm-hmm. And so the critical skill that you need to learn is, first of all, the fact that you feel this doesn't mean it's true. And the fact that you feel this doesn't mean that this is the fundamental motivation. The fundamental motivation is always a value. And that's what you need to go find out. And, a lot of times people talk about this, right? When the worst happens, they suddenly stop feeling fear and they start dealing with the problem. Oh no, what if I have cancer? It's going to be the end of the world. And, they don't get the test. And then finally they find out they have cancer. And then it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Yeah. It's like, you don't feel fear once the problem is here. If you look at it, you can, some people are delusional and they pretend that they don't have it. But if you say, yeah, oh my God, I got to do it. Once you say, oh my God, yeah, this is a threat. What are you going to do about it? Right? This is what propels you into action, but you need to actually look at it and know, the other problem with a threat is it just tells you something you want to avoid. There are 360 degrees away from a threat. Which one of those is towards something you actually want? Yep. You don't know until you figure out what is the value that's threatened. And that's the mistake people make. They just work to avoid the threat instead of figuring out, well, what do I really want? And sometimes you need to deal with the fear. I mean, I think that's what I don't like the term self-discipline because it has the word discipline in it, which basically means corporal punishment. right? I mean, that's what discipline is.
Is it?
Etymologically, that's
Okay.
where it comes from.
That's where it comes from. Okay.
Yeah. But you do need to be able to do things that are scary, unpleasant, frustrating. You need to be able to do things like that and manage all those emotions in order to get to the other side to learn a skill sometimes. And so you can't be afraid of fear. And you can't be in love with pleasure, right? You need to actually be set on rational goals and on achieving in the world. You need to have a reality focus. There's no alternative. There's no happy alternative.
I mean, this makes, courage a pretty important virtue in this context.
Yeah. 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 Yes. If you're filled with fear, courage is the virtue to pursue. And of course, it's an aspect of integrity.
Yep.
And what is integrity? It's loyalty and action to your convictions and values. You've got to figure out what your values are and what do you believe is true, and then start figuring out how to get those values based on facts. As you know.
So it's back to you got to be rational.
Yeah. Right. Right. And that it's not so much you have to be rational as that the virtue of rationality is guidance through this what can be a very difficult process. It's your life preserver. It's the thing to hold on to when you don't know what to do. You say, well, this is an honest step, or well, this is my value and I'm going to fight for it, or well, this is what I think is true, even though no one else does, or I'm going through the virtues. I don't know if that's painfully obvious or not, but
Yep.
You grab onto a virtue and you say, well, I can tell this seems to be an act of this virtue, so it must be all right.
It must be
Let me
right.
try that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So is the risk that people perceive for going out and getting achieving the goals, is that related to how ambitious the goals are? So I think people are afraid of ambitious goals because they think they're riskier. There's a lot more, and riskier, I assume, is possibility of failure.
Yes. And let's put it this way. Ambitious goals take a lot more effort, and you'll get a lot more opportunities to just give up and throw up your hands. So there's a sense that they're riskier if you don't trust yourself to see them through. And that's why I think self-esteem comes up as such a big issue, because there is an issue of trusting yourself. And that's not something, you don't do that by decree. It's not something you just say, well, I'm a worthy person, therefore I should go set this big goal. I mean, that actually has to do with how do you feel about yourself, and do you trust yourself to take the actions? And if you don't, it's finding out how to trust yourself is actually part of the process. I think this is another reason to set goals per se, not necessarily the most ambitious goals, but something that's relatively ambitious. An ambitious goal for you, for not you personally, your own, but for a person, is a goal that you don't have the skills to achieve. So like for me, I'm learning to play tennis, right? I've been learning to play tennis. We're getting close to 10 years here. It's definitely more than 7 years. And I'm terrible. I mean, I am terrible. I now have good form and I'm terrible. But I never was athletic as a kid. Yeah. And it turns out I don't have, I played tennis with Peter Schwartz, and I asked him what he thought my problem was. He says, you don't have the killer instinct. It's like I'm totally non-competitive. Turns out you kind of need to be competitive if you're playing a game.
You're playing competitive sports, yes.
Yeah. If the other person hits a ball that I think is good, I stop and look at it and say, wow, really good hit. I'm really working on that, actually. I really want that killer instinct. But this is at the edge of my skill level here. And it's actually part of the reason it's fun. But I'm actively looking at, this is actually a real thing I'm thinking about, is how do you manage yourself? And I'm very interested in it because you need to manage yourself in real time. You need to manage your emotions. There's a mental set you need I play way better when I'm taking lessons. I've gotten actually pretty good at lessons. And, I've had to learn everything, Yaron. I've had to learn everything, including how to run. Like, you're going to laugh about this, but at a certain point after I'd been injured several times, I got my chiropractor recommended I get footwork drills. So I said to my tennis coach, I need footwork drills. So he gave me some footwork drills, including some running.
Yeah.
And then after he watched me doing them one time, he said, okay, you need to take bigger steps when you're running. It turns out I ran like this. It turns out you run much faster if you take bigger steps. You get faster immediately. It's amazing how much faster you get if you take long steps. Like, this is the level of knowledge I had about athletics, right? But I'll tell you, it was a complete victory, and I love running. I would never go on a run, but I love running around the tennis court and taking these big steps. And I'm like, wow, look at how fast I am. Now I take these big steps. So it is an ambitious goal for me. It wouldn't be an ambitious goal for someone else. Mm-hmm. And yet I'm getting tremendous pleasure as I learn each little piece of it. And I do occasionally win games now. I don't win sets particularly, but I do occasionally win games.
You win a game once in a while. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I haven't played tennis in years and years and years. Decades, probably.
Okay, you could probably cream me, but anyway.
Yeah, I would swing once and hit the ball, and my back would.
Oh, so you don't want to try it?
And I would be out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was fairly good once a long time ago.
Right. So I guess the reason I was saying that is that you can set goals, like as part of the way that you kind of get into a virtuous cycle is you set goals that are at the right level now, something that is ambitious and that you're going to need to grow into it, but it has some pleasure along the way. So like from the very first lesson in tennis I had, where I literally only made contact with the ball about 5% of the time. Yeah. That's our best guess. But when I did hit it, it went whack. And I thought that was fun. And I was completely sold.
Yeah.
And
but it's important that ambition doesn't mean that you have to be the best tennis player in the world. Ambition just means it's in your context.
Yes. Right. It's in your context because it's you who's growing and it's you who's going to get the pleasure and the pride and the confidence from that growth. And that's what's going to set up a virtuous cycle. And it's absolutely true that playing tennis has actually helped me in other, it has a bleeding out effect. Any goal you set that you start getting this virtuous cycle going is going to bleed off into other things. There are a lot more areas of fitness that I'm stronger in now.
Oh, of course,
because of tennis and also mental things, so, there is that's partly because of my interest in psychology and it's a very mental game, but it's not a coincidence. It all feeds onto everything else.
It sounds like though, when you talk about failing to achieve a goal, it's always that you give up. There could be external factors that make your goal. Businesses go under in spite of the best efforts of founders and people who work at them.
Yes. So there is also a contextual element to it. Let's see if I can, let me try to give an example here because part of the thing is how you frame the success. And so for example, there are sometimes when you can't like in the case of tennis, unless suppose I got a back injury so that I was like medically not able to play tennis anymore. Obviously I wouldn't continue with my tennis goal.
Yep. Because
it would not be in my rational self-interest to injure myself, and just as it wouldn't be in your rational self-interest to play tennis right now. But I wouldn't call that a failure so much because I had success all along the way. When I look at all the things I've learned from trying to learn tennis, it's true. my goal is to become a 4.0 tennis player. It's not clear I'm actually even really a 2.5 tennis player.
Yeah.
This is a very ambitious goal, right? And if I stay healthy enough, I will probably eventually get there. I don't see any obvious reason why I can't. But there could be something that would make me decide that that, for example, that I should switch to a different sport, or that I should, and then it would be like say a different fitness goal, let's say. And so the point there is that you sometimes need to go more abstract in order to course correct, but it's still a course correction of some kind. And that's the way I would look at it. I would look at it as a course correction. So like a business that, this really happens in businesses, that you need to do a lot of experiments every iteration, like the minimum viable product I was talking about. It's an experiment to try to see, because you think that this is going to work and you think this is the way to get to your goal, and you need the real life feedback. You actually cannot predict the future. So whenever you set a 20-year goal, it has to be with a contextual proviso that, given what I think is true, but bearing on new facts that are going to come, that are going to come up, I'm going to need to adjust course based on new facts. And it's not a failure if you actually put out a product, or particularly one where you've made the decision, this is the minimum viable product, we're going to try to get proof of concept here. If you don't get proof of concept, that is not a failure. That is a very important data point, which it's very good you did early, so that you didn't throw a whole lot of money away before you figured out that this is not a viable concept. Right.
Sure, but it might mean the end of your business. So
it might mean
the
end of your business.
In that sense, it could be a failure. And so I'm not sure failure should have that negative of a connotation.
Yes.
In that context, right?
Right. I think that's right. And so this is true of all investments, right? You can put in the money because you think it's going to pay off. You do not have omniscience.
Yep.
You can't predict the future. And so it's interesting. I think I need to figure out how to say this exactly, because it's feeling like I'm doing weasel words here to try to say it's not a failure. So it is a bad thing. Let's definitely establish that if the business goes out of business, it's a bad thing. If you lose your investment money, it's a bad thing.
Well, investment's a little different, but if you're a founder and you start a business, hire people, and you've got a great idea, and for whatever reason, competitors you didn't see coming arise, the technology just, the business doesn't work, it fails.
Right.
And I think failure is not a bad word. I think failure's a good word if we understand it within the context.
So tell me what you're thinking, because I think this is very interesting and I want to hear it.
I mean, you can fail at stuff all the time, and if you learn from that failure,
Yes.
and if you use that failure to grow in some ways, then you as a person grow, even if this particular venture, this particular goal is not achieved, or this particular, value is not attained. The bigger value,
Yes.
you can grow as a consequence of it. So, every time SpaceX sends up a rocket and it blows up midair, people are, it's a failure. It was supposed to go into orbit, but it's a failure that allows them to grow. It's a failure that allows for bigger success in the bigger context. And if the context ultimately is your life, then you are growing by learning from the failures you engage in. And almost every successful entrepreneur out there has failed.
Yes. Right. Yes. Yes. I agree with everything you said, and listening to you also clarified what I was trying to get at. So I agree with you about failure, and that the idea that you don't fail unless you stop trying. I think you're right. I think that's not a good way to put it. The point is, you need to make sure if you fail, it was totally worth it. And all of the cases you have, because you learned from them, because you did what in your judgment was the best thing, because you gave it your all, you have no regrets about it, The failure is totally worth it, and it doesn't have the pain associated with it when it's just you didn't actually try. When you
Absolutely.
don't try and it fails, it's like it's the guilt and the shame and the grief are huge, and there's nothing redeeming. Whereas when you gave it your all and it's really you learned something about reality as a result of it, it feels completely different. It's still painful. Let's be clear, but it's a clean pain, and
you can grow out of it. You can
grow out of it, and it's part of the way you figure out that that it's worth taking this risk is that it's worth it because you actually what you're going to get if you fail in a certain way. That's actually part of the calculus as when you make a commitment, and that what gives you the certainty to be able to take action and make that commitment is having considered the failure option.
It's interesting that there are cultures, that embrace the idea of failure to grow. That failure is kind of is part of the process, and there are cultures that reject that. So if you look at the U.S. or Silicon Valley is generally a culture where if somebody's failed, okay, well, what are you going to do now? Is kind of the attitude. Whereas in Europe, you fail, okay, well, obviously you're not meant to be an entrepreneur. You better get an 8-to-5 job, and that's why it's a big part of why entrepreneurship in Europe is much, much, much smaller, much, much less impactful than it is in the US. Because there you get one failure. And if you get one shot, and if you fail at that one shot, you're out. Nobody will give you money, your family will walk, you're labeled a failure. Whereas in the US, it's never been the case. It's always been, okay, what next?
What next? Yes. Yeah. Right. Learn and go on, tie a knot and go on. Yep.
Yeah. So it's interesting how this gets inculcated into cultures, kind of the different attitudes.
Yeah. Huh. I didn't know that, but that makes a lot of sense.
And what next doesn't have to be the same, pursuing exactly the same goal. So it's not like you're trying to do the same thing. You might be trying to do something different, but you've learned from the experience and you're building on it.
And these things shape you, right? I mean, success shapes you, failure shapes you.
My favorite story is Steve Jobs. Who's my hero generally, right? But fired from Apple, starts a computer company called Next, which doesn't go anywhere. But in the meantime, buys this company called Pixar that happens to change movies in a big way, and then returns to Apple and makes it the most successful company in history. And, so that arc is just, to me, is a great example of that.
Yeah.
And how he grows. And he talks about how he grew through the process.
Yeah. I'm sure you've read Becoming Steve Jobs.
No.
Oh,
is it good?
It's a biography by someone who loved him, unlike the authorized biography. Yeah. And it specifically talks about the metamorphosis he went through during the years at Next, where he went from being not a good CEO to being what he was at Apple when he returned, and the things he learned. And it's a really interesting book. It's totally worth reading, Becoming Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Good. I'll definitely get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, some people feel like I think is the right thing. They can't achieve their goals, or they can't achieve certain goals, or they set themselves up with very limited possibilities right in advance. Even young people, which is tragic.
Yeah.
So they're very, very narrow. How do you get out of that?
Well, I think it's important to realize you can't get somebody else out of that.
Yeah.
But if they come to you for help, the place to look is something that they already want, right? The way that you build stronger values is by starting with whatever values you have now. And that is not always obvious, right? But as I said, any fear you have is a value in disguise. And so the first way you can help someone like that is help them figure out what it is they actually like. So the practice I learned, well, I've kind of turned it into a tactic, but celebration and mourning. There are tactics out there. Like I learned this from Martin Seligman. He called it a gratitude process, but I just call it 3 good things, because it's 3 good things that happened yesterday. It's basically a celebration process, is what I would say. And it's actually even better. Lynn Zinzer, who's the head coach for my thinking lab, she does 3 good things that I did yesterday. So there's a really selfish, it's got pride in there. And one thing, if you do this every day, what Seligman said is this is one of the, he's kind of leading the positive psychology movement. And this is one of the things that they did with undergraduates in experiments that actually had an impact on their happiness. And the reason it had an impact is because they liked it so much, they kept doing it after the experiment was over. So 6 months later, they were happier because they've been doing this every day for 6 months.
Yep.
And I think that's, that is part of what you need to do. You need to actually start celebrating, and actually they can be as small as you want. That's part of the rule of the 3 good things is find 3 good things from yesterday. And it doesn't matter how small they were. I didn't break any glasses. Yay! I'm just making something up. Now, I did actually break something yesterday, so
Okay.
That's not one of my 3 good things from yesterday, but I have other good things from yesterday. But it gets you in the habit of actually seeing what you did that you think is good, or what happened that you think is good, because it really is. There are all kinds of trite things about, well, you can look at the glass as half full or half empty. But there is an issue of what are you looking for? There is an issue of what is your mental set? Are you looking for values, or are you focused just on threats? And the emotions you have when you focus on values are love, desire, joy, pride, gratitude. Let's see. There's some others that I'm just going out of my mind. There's also grief, right? Grief is actually a value-oriented emotion. So the flip side of celebration is mourning. And I think the other thing that you need to do to try to get out of this really narrow thing is if there is something you've lost, so an opportunity that you didn't take, or that you screwed up, or whatever it is, actually really looking at that and seeing why you care that you lost that, and understanding what are the values you lost. This is another way of honoring your values and of getting clearer on your values. Both celebration and mourning are values clarification exercises. And it's one of the things you do, when you lose a family member. I mean, I've lost both my parents now, and the process of mourning is you actually get clearer on why they were such an important part of your life. I love both my parents. I'm very fortunate. And I learned things about them, and I learned things about what was wonderful about them that I literally was not aware of when they were alive. And it took that contrast of losing them and being sad, and actually looking at what is it I'm missing, and realizing, wow, mom always did that, or dad always did that. And I didn't even know how much I appreciated that at the time.
Yeah.
And you actually understand these things. And then once you understand the things you care about, you can then fight for them in the present. And that's what awareness is, the first step. And it's a gentle process. If you're closed in, you need to be gentle with yourself and just open up and start actually understanding your values. And once you start paying attention to your values, you'll also start wanting to act again and keep them. And then you can start setting a little bit bigger goal and a little bigger goal.
So what would make a goal an irrational goal as compared to a rational one?
Well, I mean, there's the easy cases where the justification for it is something completely irrational. So there are all kinds of second-handed goals. Like some people want money because as a social comparison thing, right? I want to have more money than those other people because I want to be a big shot or whatever it is, right? That's a terrible reason for wanting money. And so anything that involves second-handedness, if the goal is set for a second-handed reason, it is an irrational goal, and it is gonna bite you in the butt if you go after it. Now, the thing that's confusing about that is that you can have a goal that has in fact, any goal that you can achieve, it has got to have some rational element. So like take making a really big business, making a business really succeed. No one can actually make a business succeed without being somewhat focused on reality.
Yep.
You need to actually produce things on a schedule for an amount that people will pay, right? I mean, there are a lot of facts there and values involved that have to be addressed, or else you will not make money. But you could have a really wrong reason for doing that. And if that's the case, you won't get the pleasure out of it. And if that's the case, one of the things that you need to do is you need to untangle the rational part of the goal, which is usually a creation goal, from the irrational part, which is like to impress people, or maybe it's something like, so because I never want to feel unsafe again, which is not possible. That's like impossible, right? Life is risky. I mean, life is a process of continuous action, because if you stop the action, you die. You literally die, right? So there is no such thing as safety. And so if you've built in something that's impossible into the goal, even if it seems like the concrete that you're trying to get is possible, if you've loaded it with a reason that's impossible, or a payoff that you're expecting that's impossible, or an irrational justification, that would make it an irrational goal. And you can't necessarily tell that from the outside. That's something that you have to figure out from the inside. And the way you figure it out is you wind up having ambivalence about your goal, because if you have any irrational motivation built into it, you will be pulled in a couple of different directions. It won't be all aligned around one thing.
How do you know if you've set a goal that's really impossible?
Well, it depends.
Like if you set a goal in tennis to be, I don't know how the rating system goes.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's see, to be world champion. I think
that would be ridiculous, but to be much better than you.
Right. Let's say professional level.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For me to be professional level at 62. Right. Okay. I mean, this is not going to happen. So, the person you have to convince that it is logically possible is yourself. Right. I do not think I could convince myself that's logically possible just from what I know about anatomy and things like that, right? It might have been potentially possible if I'd set that goal when I was 14. I really don't know. Maybe it would have needed to have been 8. It's not clear to me how early you need to start developing some of these skills before, that I'll never have the kind of coordination that I would have if I had been sports oriented at a younger age. I really don't know. But let's take something like, I have a goal, which I think probably a lot of people think is totally impossible, which is to have a $10 million business, meaning $10 million revenue a year.
Mm-hmm.
And now that is a very long range goal, Yaron. This is
that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And to say that I'm nowhere close there is such an understatement. I mean, it is a little bit ridiculous to even say it out loud. But the reason that I actually have that, and I have it, and I don't have it as like a committed thing where I have a plan to get to it, but I have a commitment to figure out how to really make money and build a scalable business. I really do have that commitment. Mm-hmm. And I am actively working on that. And the reason I don't think it's crazy is because of this coach that I mentioned, Brooke Castillo. She has a business that's made $50 million a year.
Wow.
And so it's a life coach business. And she talks about how she set this goal. She's actually made $100 million, actually. And she's made enough money at this point. She said, what would she set next? $1 billion? That was ridiculous. She wasn't interested in $1 billion. So she isn't setting a $1 billion goal. She's moving on to other goals. But I mean, that's wildly exciting. And that would have, tremendous impact. It's like really opened up my horizons to think, wow, that might be possible. Now I have a ton of things I need to work on to be able to do that. Like my attitude toward money isn't good. I in the same way I don't have the killer instinct in tennis, I don't have the competitive instinct in business. And I need that in order to make some money. And so I'm literally working on some of these values, and I may never get there. And it might be that it is in fact impossible. It may be that I'll die trying, or it may be that in 10 years, when I have solved a lot of business problem, I'll also decide that I'm not actually that interested in business. And so I don't want to learn the additional business skills to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't see any reason in principle that I couldn't do that. And if assuming that I live long enough, and assuming that I live for at least 20 or 30 years or something like that. So I don't think that's an impossible goal. But you see, I have some basis. It is not an arbitrary goal. I have some basis for believing it's possible. It's exactly the possible, probable issue, that there needs to be some evidence that this could be done, and there can't be any evidence that it's impossible. And so let's get another example of something that might be impossible. Or does this answer the question, or am I?
I think so. No, I think that's good. I think
this is why you can't do how does anyone survive with the objectivist ethics and epistemology? I don't know how they survive, Yaron.
Without it, yeah.
Without it, I don't know how they survive.
And they've survived for 100,000 years without it.
I know, those poor people.
They must have had some of it implicit in some way.
Yes, that is it. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So we've got a bunch of questions. Maybe we should shift the questions.
Sure.
Let's see. You want to say something about your website?
Yes.
January 1, anything like that? You want to?
Right. Pitch? So this, if you have goals and you want to get some help actually working on them and getting them achieved in 2026, I have coaching programs for that. So I have a coaching program called Launch that's actually going to start January 10th. It runs for 8 weeks, and it's a group coaching program. And I coach people to set the goals so they can actually get it. It could be a 10-year goal, but you want to achieve something major within that 8 weeks. And I will coach you till you figure out something that will objectively move you toward your long-term goal and get you some momentum. And if you're curious about this, I have a freebie. I'm running a freebie on January 1st. It's called Motivating Steady Work on a Major Goal. And that's part of what you need. If you've got a long-range goal, you got to be able to work on it consistently, even when you don't feel like it. And that's what I'm going to be talking about on January 1st. So if you go to my website, thinkingdirections.com, so that's thinking like using your brain, directions like north, south, east, and west, and there's more than one of them, so thinkingdirections.com. There's a sign up for the freebie and lots of other stuff there.
And I assume that's all virtual. That's all over.
All Zoom. Yes.
Over Zoom. Okay.
All Zoom. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yep.
Excellent. And then we should also mention that we are going to be at Rand's Day Weekend Objectivist Conference.
Yes. Yes.
And what are you going to be talking about?
I'm going to be talking on self-esteem, reliance on the power to think. It's going to be really interesting. It's I've been thinking a lot about that topic and thinking about Ayn Rand's line that self-esteem is reliance on the power your power to think is so exactly true. It's such an important idea. Nobody else has that idea. Nobody else has that idea. That's what I'm going to be talking about. What about you? What are you talking about, Yaron?
I'm talking about, trade. It sounds so much more boring than your topic. The history of free trade and tariffs and all that fun stuff. So a little bit of economics and history. There's some really interesting American history there.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, it will be fascinating. The one you gave last year was absolutely fascinating. It was great. I mean, I thought it was a really fun conference. It's a little smaller conference,
Yeah, yeah, I know
but
it's a lot of fun.
it's in Florida. It's
It's
in
in Florida
Florida.
in February,
Yes,
in late January, early February. So you don't want to be anywhere else in the world in late January, early February. Florida is the place to be
right.
because the weather is perfect, the sun shines, and yeah. So if you guys still want to, if you guys want to sign up, and you should come. And again, it's small, so it's intimate, so you get more time to talk to one another, and the speakers are all hanging out, and we're gonna have Don and Peter Schwartz and Shoshana Milgram and Ellen Kenner, and of course Harry Binswanger will be there.
Mhm.
Go to Rand's Day Con. So randsdaycon.thebvh.com. Now, that is a terrible URL. Whoever does the marketing for this, they need a better, like something short and simple, right? Randscon.com, that would be good.
Hey,
Um,
I can give you an easy thing for people who want.
yeah.
Uh, Harry and I own, TOF Publications owns randsday.com. If you go to randsday.com,
Yep.
it tells
Much
what
better.
Randsday is, and at the bottom is a link to the Randsday Con
Much
weekend
better.
conference. So
Go
go
to
to randsday.com,
randsday.com
and then the
because
bottom of the page, go to the
yeah, because
conference.
the BVH is like way, it blows the crow and everything else out of the water, so it's impossible.
Uh,
Um, Toby says he's in the UK. I mean, nobody wants to be in the UK in late January. Get on a plane. They're cheap flights to Florida and come on over. I don't think it's going to be streamed. No.
it's not going to be streamed. We had someone come from the Canary Islands last year. You got no excuse. No
Absolutely.
excuse.
And the Canary Islands, the weather's good in late
Yeah.
January. So,
Yeah.
but the UK, I know what the weather's like in the UK in late January. It's
Right.
not good. All right. So we have questions. You can still ask questions. So feel free to ask questions and jump in. And if you want to just support the show, you can use the sticker feature. But questions are good because that way we get content. This is good.
Yes.
All right. So this is $50. Molten Splendor. I love his handle. Molten Splendor. That's great. So here's his question. He says, I had a great career for 45 years. I'm now retired. I'm passionately engaged in collecting and researching a specific genre of art glass. I'm a terrible reader of nonfiction. My mind wanders. Any tips on how to become a better reader of nonfiction?
Well, I would suggest you get some nonfiction on this genre of art glass that you're interested in. So the way to develop any skill is to have a selfish value for developing it. So that's the first thing. Probably it's this stuff that you're reading about. So here's the second thing. This is something I actually just learned from a book called the Practicing Mind, which I just recommended on my website yesterday. If you're trying to develop a new skill, you need a practice that you can do that is easy. And the 4 key words are simple, short, small, and slow. So keep it simple, short, small, and slow. I got this from the Practicing Mind. I knew about keep it simple, sweetie, but I didn't know about keep it simple, short, small, and slow. So let's explain what that might be for reading nonfiction. So the whole issue is you need retention, right? Retention is the key thing you're going for. So a simple way to improve your retention might be to read a page and write one sentence of something you learned. And that might be also, and if that's too much, then well, let's stipulate if that's not too much, that's small enough, right? It has to be small enough that you could say, read that page and then set back and say, what did I get from that page? And if that's not small enough, if you can't do that, then make it smaller. Take a paragraph and say, what did I get from that? And it's okay to say, I didn't get anything from that. That was boring. So this is very important. People think that they should have to read every paragraph of a book because someone said it was on a topic that they should read. Books have to be interesting. If the book is not interesting, you don't have to read it. So this is so here's a short test for whether I'm trying to come up with something that's simple, small, short, and slow. Here's a short test. Is this interesting or not? And if it's not interesting, you don't have to read it. If it's mildly interesting or you think it should be interesting, name why it's interesting. Now that will slow you down. But if you can name why this is interesting, why you care, that will make you more curious about the next paragraph. Now, you might not need to do this on every paragraph. You may need to, once a page, say, what did I learn? Was it interesting? Or what would make it interesting? And answer those questions for yourself. And that will help you figure out if you should even be reading this book. And if you are reading this book, it should help you retain it. So I just made that up as a process. The point is you need something like that where you're going to actually practice and have that be your test of success. Your test of success is not what you got out of the whole book. Your test is, did you do that 3 times while you were reading today or something like that? I did this actually with tennis. This is the example that's in the article that I wrote yesterday. Terrible. Like I'm playing a game with Harry and I'm terrible. I'm just terrible. And I'm like, why can't I do what I do in my coaching session? And I said, I need something simple, short, small, and slow. And so I said, okay, I'm just going to try to do a split step whenever he hits the ball. This is a particular thing you do in tennis. I could try to demonstrate it, but you jump up and with your feet apart, and this puts you in a position so that you can then move in the direction of where the ball goes. And you do it when the other person hits the ball, which is just before you're going to find out, is it going to your left or your right? And so it gets you ready. And it turns out it's quite hard for me to actually do that, to actually stop whatever I'm doing, pay enough attention so I can see that he's about to hit the ball, get in position so I can do a split step when he hits the ball. My game got much better immediately when I did that. But I tested my success not on whether I hit the ball or whether I got the point, but whether I did the split step. And I focused on, and this is the other thing from that book, do, observe, correct. So I just focused on, did I do the split step? And if I did, yay. And if I didn't, why not? Oh, I need to look a little earlier. And I got better at it. So that's the kind of thing you need. To be more specific, I'd need to actually talk to you about why it's hard to read the nonfiction.
Great. Thanks, Moulton. Harry has a comment. Please repeat the idea of finding the value behind the fear-based emotion. I find it so powerful.
Okay. Hey, you should find the fear behind the fear-based emotion. I guess maybe we could give an example. What's something someone might be afraid of?
Well, the failing.
Yeah, but we need an actual goal
Okay.
that they would have a concrete fear about. Well, so let's take Moulton. Let's take Moulton's example. Suppose he's afraid he's going to spend all this time reading this book and he's not going to get anything out of it. He's not going to have learned anything. It's going to be a total waste of time. He's going to be bored out of his mind. It's like, I don't want to read this book. It's going to be terrible, right? He's all kinds of threat-oriented emotions about it. So one of the things you can do to turn around a threat-oriented emotion is you can just, in effect, rant about it like I just did. I just made up a rant for our friend, right? But the rant has in it the seeds of the values. So like, it's going to be boring. okay, so you really want to be intellectually stimulated. That gives you, intellectual stimulation is a deep rational value. So that actually gives you a way to say, well, what is that? That's actually one of the reasons I suggested Moulton ask, was it interesting? Or how could it be interesting? If you can figure out why it might be interesting to you, that will make a big difference in your being able to take in information. And you can find out that that's what you care about, because when you rant about the problem, you're worried about being bored. Or I'm going to waste all this time. Well, okay, so the thing you want is you want to get bang for your buck, right? You want to actually get a payoff. Well, and the payoff is in some kind of understanding. Well, that's also the thing that I just suggested is also related to that, because I put in the question, what did I take from this? This is a known thing, a tactic that I've taught, actually the first tactic that I ever taught, something called condensation, where I learned it from Peter Schwartz at the Objectivist Graduate Center, and you extract the main points and theme from a piece of writing. And this is an incredible study technique. If you try to write, you read a paragraph or you read a section, and you try to name in one sentence what the point of that is. It's an incredible study technique. It absolutely, I've done this for all of OPAR, and I know OPAR very well as a result. It's an incredibly helpful tactic. It really helps with understanding. Now, you might not know that offhand, but if you know that what you want is something that helps you retain material, you can then go look on the internet for strategies. Ed Locke has a book, How to Study, and it has this kind of thing in it too. I mean, this is not a completely alien strategy that you're getting from me, and it's not the only strategy. So the first step in turning the threat-oriented, the fear or the fear-based emotion, is put it into words. What are you afraid of? Explain what you're afraid of, and then look at what exactly you're afraid of and see if you can name, well, what does that mean I want? You usually want the opposite of it, but it's something concrete. It's more concrete than just the emotion tends to be a little bit vague and abstract.
Harry suggests the fear of public speaking.
Yes, well, people are afraid of public speaking for different reasons, right? Some people are afraid that they're going to look stupid. Some people are afraid that they're not going to have anything to say. So you, in order to solve the fear of public speaking, you need to actually name, what are you afraid of? And some of them turn out to be chimeras, right? I'm afraid that I won't get my point across. Well, you definitely won't get your point across if you don't do the public speaking, for sure, right? You have zero chance of getting your point across if you don't try. And it's very helpful to put that into perspective, because sometimes you've got kind of a false contrast in the back of your mind, and making it explicit makes you see what your actual choices are.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Harry. Let's see. Andrew. Rand wrote in a letter that she did love herself. Albeit it is a different feeling than love she had for others. What's Jean's view on the nature of self-love? Is it synonymous with self-esteem?
I haven't thought about that. I don't think it's synonymous with self-esteem, because I think self-esteem has a lot to do with your capacity to act in the world. And self-love is about you being a good person, which is, related to self-esteem. But when I think self-love, I think taking delight in myself. And it's a lot more like romance in the sense of, I'm really glad I exist, and I've done this and I've done this, and yay me. And there's a kind of celebration involved in self-love. Whereas self-esteem is a little bit more solid and forward-looking and feet on the ground. How's that for an answer?
I mean, I think that's right. I think that's basically right. I mean, we can probably, if you think about it more, I think you'll probably refine the answer.
Sure.
But, yeah. Andrew, though a scoundrel, Brandon's essay on pleasure and pain in virtue of selfishness is critical for former religionists or cynic to integrate objectivism. How does one convert from negative emotional purposes, sadness and guilt, to positive joy?
Okay, I'm going to take the question. I'm not entirely sure how it relates to the
Yeah,
article.
me neither. Okay.
But I mean, Ayn Rand edited the publication that came in. I'm not
Yeah.
surprised you got some value from it. There, so the first thing with any emotion, so you don't change, your goal should not be to change your emotions, right? If your focus is on, I want to feel a certain way, that is an emotionalist goal. And I don't mean that to give you, like, to make you feel bad. I'm giving that to you because you're interested in objectivism and you recognize that emotionalism is self-destructive. Part of the problem you can get into or confusion that people have about setting happiness as the purpose of life is that they then set emotions as goals, positive emotions as goals. And that does not follow. If happiness is your purpose, your goals need to be rational. They need to be objective things that you can achieve in reality. And emotions are not objective. They are transient experiences that you have. What they are, and the way to think about them, which is very important, is that they are alerts. You think of them as alerts. You do not have an emotion unless some value of yours, something that you care about deeply, and I mean here, when I use the word value, I mean in the philosophical sense, something rational, something that is in fact good for human life. When you have an emotion, there is some value of yours that is at stake, meaning your action right now is going to determine whether you gain or keep that, or lose it, or harm it. And the reason that it's so important to introspect emotions is that the emotion won't necessarily tell you what that value is. You need to introspect the emotion to figure out what is the value at stake right now. And that is very, very situational specific. And your emotions change really quickly. I mean, what's at stake changes as things unfold. So each of the emotions, the way I teach this, I have classes on this too. And I have a tactic I call Introspection 101. The way I teach it is you need to, okay, I teach it several ways. Let me just say what it is. You need to figure out which basic family of emotion it is. The ones you mentioned, the ones that were mentioned in the question were basic families. Each basic family, like anger and gratitude is a family, or joy and grief are a family, or desire and aversion are a family. Each basic family has a signature evaluation associated with it. So anger and gratitude are about other people. Anger is the other person did something that was bad. Gratitude is they did something that was good for me. Bad for me or good for me. That's what anger and gratitude are. Whereas joy and grief are I gained a value or I lost a value. Desire and aversion is, they're like, in certain sense, they're the most big. Desire is something, this is, if I acted to get this, it would be good. And aversion is, if I acted to get this, it would be bad. So don't do that.
Yep.
So you need to figure out, what you do is you take the emotion, you know what the generalized evaluation is, and then you figure out concretely, in this situation, what are the pieces? Like, if you're angry, who's the person and what did they do that was bad? Or if you're feeling grief, what is the thing you lost? And sometimes you need to go one level deeper. You get to the value and then say, why is that important to me? Why is that important to me? You need to go more abstract. Because, for example, if you lost something like, I did something the other day that I really wish I hadn't done. And when I introspected it, because I really felt guilty about it, it was professionalism. I really wanted professionalism. And so you can't get back what happened last week where you acted unprofessionally. But if you sit there and you say, gee, professionalism really matters to me. What can I do to become more professional now? How can I act now to be more professional? What that does is that shifts things, that makes professionalism a higher value to you. You take an action now, like, I sent an apology. I actually took some steps to learn from it. I actually put some things in place so that I wouldn't do that again. And this was for me, right? This is to develop my value of professionalism. This is not because I owe other people an apology. This is part of my pursuing my values. And that's what heals all wounds. It's the identifying the value that is in fact underlying that emotion and then pursuing that value. That shifts everything. As soon as you start pursuing the value, as soon as you put yourself in that mindset, you start feeling desire and confidence. As soon as you start getting it, you start feeling pride and joy. That's what shifts the emotions. But that is a byproduct of your acting to gain and keep values. So whatever emotion you have, it's an alert to some value at stake. And the rational responsibility there is to figure out what is the value and how do I act to gain and keep it now. And sometimes you have to go more abstract. Sometimes you have to go more abstract to be able to do that.
Yeah, good. Richard. It just says, you mentioned the issue of putting morality above happiness. Would you elaborate on that?
Well, I just got this from Tara's book. But I think the way she put it, and which really resonated for me, is one of the things that brought me to objectivism was I had a strong sense of morality, of good and bad. I really believed in right and wrong and good and bad, and I was going to be good and right. And so Ayn Rand's moral confidence was one of her big attractions to me, and the moral confidence of the characters in Atlas Shrugged. That was, one of the big things that I resonated with, the moral certainty. And so that came first for me. And I had a whole lot of altruism baked in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why, I've told this story, but, unlike the vast majority of hardcore objectivists, it took 7 years between the time I read Atlas Shrugged and the time I decided she was right. Really right.
Yeah.
And that is not a typical case.
No.
And the thing that I had to be convinced on is that altruism is wrong in principle. And that's what I figured out 7 years later. But the part of I need to do what's right was stronger. And a lot of the things that I figured out over time, I was very focused on doing what was right. And I saw then when I wasn't happy. So like I had a big problem with the duty premise, right?
Yeah.
And when I started my business, I actually really got myself sick by working too hard because I thought that was the right thing to do. And I just made myself work and it didn't matter how I felt. This was before I started talking about emotional overload.
Yeah.
And I had to learn this stuff the hard way. This is one of the reasons I know so much. If you want to find someone who is a good teacher, find someone who really had to learn it for themselves.
Lived it, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Anyway, and not only did I do it the hard way, but I liked that I was doing hard stuff. That actually turns out to be also slightly a misconception. If you pick a goal because it's hard, don't rule out the goal because it's hard, but don't pick it because it's hard. That's, pick it because you're interested in it. It's not a feature that it's hard. Anyway, that's an aside. So the thing is that I would then say, oh, I'm not happy. So I must be doing something wrong. What am I doing wrong? And I would analyze it that way. And then I'd figure out what the right thing to do was. And then I'd find out that I wasn't happy again. And in effect, happiness didn't have a high enough standing in my psychology. I mean, I was pro-happiness. I definitely was on board that happiness was, the purpose of life and that I should be happy and all this stuff. But it wasn't an operant factor in my deciding what was the right thing to do. The right thing to do is what I saw was the right thing to do, and to hell with how I feel. That was basically, I mean, this was now a long time ago, but that was basically what my attitude was. And to completely get that out of my psychology has, I figured out it was wrong. And then to get it out of your psychology is not the easiest thing in the world. So what this line of Tara's did for me was, well, it tied in with the article that Ayn Rand wrote, who is the final authority in ethics, which is, Q&A from one of the old back issues. I think it's probably in The Virtue of Selfishness too, where she says that question is mistaken because there is no who, there is no God, there is no authority in ethics. And so, Tara's line is a little twist on that it's your commitment to happiness which gives ethics its authority. I mean, that just completely makes it be about you and your life. And it sets the hierarchy right, that you do need to. So this is something that, again, I've learned the hard way, that you need to set goals and pursue them in a way so that there's pleasure as you go. There's payoffs along the way. I mean, I've known that for years. I've coached people on that. And yet I saw that as a practical issue. And I think Tara turned it into a moral issue. The pleasure along the way has got to be a given. That's got to be factored into your plans, because happiness is the purpose of your life. And it's not good if you aren't seeing the connection to your happiness. And that's not happiness at sometime 20 years in the future. Happiness, I mean, I gave 2 talks on happiness, but I really, happiness is an ongoing state where in effect you are achieving your values plural, meaning that your values are consistent and you can kind of achieve them all at once. That's the kind of switcheroo that I got from Tara's introduction to her book.
Good. All right, let's see. Friend Harper says, if annoyed is an emotion, what is a psychoepistemological response to it? I see it as I had an expectation and it's being ignored or disrespected. Also, it was an honor meeting you at Ocon 25.
Likewise. So annoyed is in the anger family. So this is the way I would analyze it. It's a mild form of anger. Somebody done you wrong. It was a small wrong, but somebody done you wrong. Okay. So one of the things, can you repeat what he said?
I had an expectation and it's being ignored or disrespected.
Okay, right. So the concrete expectation you had is the critical thing. What were you expecting? That was the value that was ignored or disrespected. That's what you need to identify. Like, so for example, just a little example. You're going out of an old-fashioned store that does not have electric doors, and the person in front of you lets the door fall so that it kind of, instead of just holding it for 2 seconds so that you can get your hand on it so that it's a little easier to go out the door. Now, that would be a small enough item to feel annoyed. And there is an expectation there. There's an expectation of, just a little bit of support, a little bit of goodwill, a little bit of situational awareness that there's someone right behind them, and benevolence, right? And so naming that, this is, I just named 4 things that I would be wishing for and would feel annoyed that I hadn't gotten if that happened. So then the question is, what can I do? So I'm feeling a lack, right? There's a little grief in there that I didn't get benevolence, support, situational awareness. Okay, we'll just use those three.
Yeah.
Those are values of mine which have they feel like I'm not getting these values. So what do? Increase your situational awareness. Make sure you hold the door for the next person. Pause and tell yourself that it doesn't matter, they don't support you, because you've got your back. I mean, there are little things you can do in that moment which will in effect completely change your mood. And I mean, it seems a little over the top for just being annoyed because a person didn't hold the door, but I needed an example. But the point is that you can do that. And that's what you do. You know, the fact that another person misbehaved doesn't, when you process that emotion, first of all, in some cases, you may conclude that they didn't misbehave. But assuming they did misbehave, that doesn't mean that they're then going to apologize or make restitution. That's not what it's about. Mm-hmm. It's about you understanding your values and understanding that you can get your values no matter what other people do. And like, for example, I mean, this happens like with businesses, which we've been talking about businesses. You try to sell your product to someone and they don't buy it. Well, it doesn't, that's not the end of the world. As long as you have a product that some people want, you can sell it to other people. You need some but any customers. You don't have to have this particular customer. You don't have to have this particular person giving you support. You don't have to have this particular person be someone with situational awareness. But it does mean you now know that, like, if you're trying to figure out who you're going to date, you like someone who is generous, benevolent, and has situational awareness. I'm just making this up.
Yep.
You understand your values a little bit more. I think I've really beat that example as far as it can be done. I think it's dead.
I think it's good. T. Gupta says, would love to hear Jean's thoughts on tips for the crisis of meaning.
I don't exactly know what he means by that. The crisis of meaning.
So this is the idea that with the death of religion, if you will, people don't know what the meaning of life is, the purpose of life is, and young people today are all turning to nihilism because they don't see meaning in life. Yeah.
Okay, all right, then I do understand that. I didn't recognize it under that title.
Yep.
So the first thing is, what gives meaning to life? Your central purpose is the fundamental thing that gives meaning to your life, is your central purpose. That's the thing that's directly under your control. Now, I do think important relationships give meaning to life too. There's a Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, mm-hmm. which, if you haven't read, everyone should read this book. He's a concentration camp survivor, and he writes about his experience in the concentration camp. He's a psychologist. And what he observed is that the people who survived were the people who found meaning. And there were three kinds. There were people like him. He was trying to reproduce a book manuscript that he had just finished before he was captured, and he didn't want to lose his book. And so he was getting little pieces of paper and writing on it, right? So he had a career purpose. He saw people who made their whole purpose keeping a loved one alive. And then when that loved one died, they died like the next day. They'd been strong and then they just lost it. Yeah. And then he saw people who used religion. They would meet and have, I'm sorry, I don't know the Jewish ceremony, but there are various Jewish ceremonies that they would do daily where they would meet and they would do them. And that was how they kept their meaning alive. And I think this is exactly like self-esteem and pseudo-self-esteem. I think religion is a source of pseudo-meaning. Mm-hmm. And that the real rational source of meaning, the one that is entirely independent and under your control, is central purpose. And so that's one of the reasons why a central purpose is indispensable in life. And I'll get to what do we do for these poor kids, because I do think there's a big issue with the young generation. And then I think that relationships are kind of an intermediate case, because you can have completely independent meaning morally independent, first-handed relationships, and they do give meaning to your life. And when the person dies, it's devastating. And I mean, it's one thing for your parents, but when you lose a loved one, I think of people I know who have lost a loved one, and it's devastating. And it takes this huge source of meaning out of their lives, and that is understandable. That person was an irreplaceable value. I mean, Ayn Rand and Frank O'Connor is, of course, an example of that.
Yep.
So the first thing you need to understand is what puts meaning into a life. The main thing that is under your volitional control is central purpose. So then what about these poor kids? Is I actually think, Adam Reed likes to call it the disminding of progressive education. But I think the worst effect of progressive education is the destruction of valuing. That was the lasting impact of progressive education on me, was the muddling up and the confusion over values and not having clear values. And I do think that is a problem. To the little extent that I know, I think that that's what the cause of this problem is. It's partly literal and conceptual skills because of the education, but it's also values. They have, even things like this, participation awards and all these other things. Mm-hmm. Because there is no developing of individual valuing and you're caring about it. It's just things that you do and everybody is equal. The leveling that they go after, it really does confuse people's valuing system. And so how do we recover on that? I mean, I think it gets back to the question you asked earlier. You've got to find something that the kid, or if the kid wants help, the place to start is something that they actually want. Anything that they want that is, got any kind of objectivity to it is the place to start building that. And I do think people are very resilient. I totally think that that these individuals, if they're reached, mm-hmm. can be inspired and pulled out of that.
Yeah.
But it is a big problem. Yeah. It is a big problem. I'm not minimizing it at all.
All right. Richard says, I told a psychiatrist that psychology needs a philosophy. He replied that every philosopher has a psychology that influences their philosophy. Any thoughts?
The read the last chapter of Opar. Philosophy is the driver of history and philosophy is the driver of psychology, for sure. This is one of the reasons I left psychology graduate school with a master's, is that it was totally clear to me that the way that people were even thinking about how to study psychology was entirely driven by their philosophical views, and they didn't know that was a total blinder. And I do think Ayn Rand's philosophy is in the process of revolutionizing psychology. I mean, there's several of us working on that problem, and I think it radically simplifies the whole science of psychology. I think that. So I don't know what else to say to that. But,
yep.
Yeah.
Right. Shazbot asks, could Edmond Dante from the Count of Monte Cristo have chosen to live a happy life by leaving everything behind after escaping, or was revenge necessary?
Well, revenge, I don't think, is a rational goal. I mean, do you think it's a rational goal, Yaron? I'm really curious, but I don't think so.
Super satisfying.
No, it's not. Actually, I mean, it is in fiction, but in real life, it's not. Right?
Well, only in the sense of justice, right? So revenge is a form of justice. And seeing bad people get away with bad stuff
Is
is
demoralizing. Yes.
demoralizing, and seeing that bad people, get what they deserve is life affirming. There is justice in it. So it's why we respond positively to revenge fiction, because we're seeing that in action. Now, to make that your central purpose in life, which is what, in a sense, the key
We
figure in
did,
Count of
right.
Monte Cristo, that is problematic, particularly if it takes a long time and it's diverting from everything, any other value, because then it becomes. But it's essentially justice, and justice is important. So
Okay, so
I
yeah,
do think it's positive.
that's very interesting because that really clarifies my point of view, which I don't think is the same as your point of view. I mean, it's not.
Harry says that Ayn Rand loathed the idea that he went after revenge.
Okay.
And you can see that because in the context of his life, it's a negative.
Well, not only that, but it's so, the other thing that Ayn Rand said is it's more important to reward the good than it is to punish the bad.
Sure.
And
But that doesn't mean it's
it,
not important to punish the bad.
it doesn't mean it's not important to punish the bad, but he did it at the expense of his life, right? He did it at the expense of having a life that created something. So I don't think punishment could be a central purpose, in the sense that I think a central purpose does need to be something you create in the world. The other thing, I mean, there's also the other thing about revenge per se. I'm going to think about this because I haven't thought about revenge. I will.
He also has to live a lie. He has to put on a lot of pretense,
Yeah,
right?
right,
I
right.
mean,
Of course, which is a dead giveaway that this couldn't be the right thing to do. But the
well,
other
but
thing,
so does a spy, right? So is a spy an immoral, you know,
well, um, so I mean, I do think that it may be that in order to be a spy, you can't be a completely integrated character.
yeah.
So let's put it this way: if you were in, like, suppose a civil war started in this country, and you decided that one of us decided that what we needed to do was to be a spy in order to, save Western civilization, right? You might, in an emergency, decide to do that, but it would destroy part of your soul. It would destroy part of your soul. The double entry bookkeeping is a problem, and you have to do it knowing you may never be. First off, you'll be killed if you're discovered, but also you may not be able to recover psychologically from that. Now, I think it would have to be an emergency situation. I think in a war situation, you might decide, this is what I'm going to do. And the same thing with, some other really destructive purpose. In a war situation, you might actually really decide going after destruction is the right thing to do, because it is really not a normal situation. But I don't think that you could be psychologically whole and therefore happy with that profession. And it might be a good fit for someone who, it might be a good fit at a certain time for someone that, I mean, I don't know. It's a little outside of my range of expertise. But
Interesting to think about. Could you be a CIA agent? Could you be
yeah,
a Mossad agent and still have a healthy psychology, have a healthy life, be happy?
yeah.
Or does it contradict?
Compartmentalization does not work.
But is it?
Yes,
So
it would absolutely be required, because I mean, I actually have a little bit of experience with this, in the sense that I worked on classified work
sure.
that I still cannot tell anyone about. And we actually had some conversations about this with some of us who were in this program, because actually was an issue. It's like you'd be having a conversation with your mother or your father or something, and the wall would come up. I can't talk about that. And it was not fun. It was not fun. And this is a moral project for, for the USA government doing rational work. And yet it had to be compartmentalized because I couldn't talk about it with certain people. So I do think there's psychological harm. But this is,
I don't know.
this is a little speculative. This is a little speculative. But I want to say one other thing.
There's a lot of things that you don't talk to other people about for a variety of reasons.
But usually you do it because you don't want to.
But why do you want to talk about something classified with somebody if it's classified? If you fully integrate it, if you fully understand the importance of keeping it classified, then you don't want to talk about it.
Oh, I think that's a little idealistic because, I'm working 40 hours a week on this program, and and it's interesting work, and I'm learning things and I'm having successes.
Yeah.
And I can't share it with the people I love.
Yeah.
It actually does affect the relationships a little bit because you have to put in a distance. So, but this is not an important,
No.
this is not like a center of the page issue that I want to argue. So it's okay with me. So
Absolutely.
but it's fun to talk about.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Here's a big one. What is your assessment of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung?
So I'm essentially ignorant. Okay. So I didn't study clinical psychology. I was in experimental psychology. And what I know about Freud, I know from reading Objectivism. And sounds pretty irrational, right? The thing that some people want to make sure he gets credit for is that he got the idea that you could talk to people and help them with their psychological problems. Although I wonder if he actually did help people with their psychological problems. I think the big problem, from what I can tell with Freud, is that he made up this crazy theory about what was going on outside of to explain experiences. And everybody has followed that up. They've all got their crazy theory about that. They're all very overcomplicated and just totally arbitrary. And Jung, was basically a Freudian who came up with his own somewhat crazy theory. Now, Jung, I know, has at least one observation that I think is true, which is the thing that drives you crazy the most in like people you love is something you don't like about yourself. He calls it like the shadow self stuff. But, he's got this crazy theory about it. So the general thing I would say, this is true for almost every psychologist. You need to look and see what the observations are and see if you think the observations are true. But and in some cases, there will be practical insights related to the observations, but the theory is essentially garbage. The theory is, it's very important not to let the theory into your head because it's destructive. It's all deterministic and will actually create more problems than it solves.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Aliens?
I have not seen the movie Aliens.
Right. Yes. Because this is a question about the hero in Aliens. Shahzad, we're gonna have to skip it this time. All right. Let's see. Lincoln asks, how does one stay motivated on your professional goals when faced with personal challenges? Should they be addressed first before focusing on work?
I don't think that this is the kind of thing that has a cookbook solution, right? Generally speaking, when you're in some kind of conflict where you think you should be doing work, but you're just completely distracted. Like, let's just make up something. You're having trouble in your marriage and you're worried about, maybe you're going to get divorced or whatever, right?
Yep.
Some real big issue that's on your mind, right? Or someone in your family is sick, right? If you're in that kind of emotional conflict, you're feeling multiple emotions, they're pulling you in multiple directions for action. The most important thing for you to do is to pause and figure out all the values at stake. You need to introspect those emotions, and remember, the emotions feel like they tell you what you should do. Emotions can't tell you what to do. They are alerts to some value at stake, and you need your rational mind, your logical reasoning mind, to figure out what those values are and what the situation is. You need, in effect, like situational awareness in this moment. Yep. And you can't get that in that emotional state. You need to take, in effect, a time out to do some introspective work, to get a little bit of distance and figure out what the values are. And it can go both ways. Like, you can decide, look, I need to take a couple of days off to take care of my personal stuff. Or like, suppose you have a very important role at work and there's a huge deadline coming up, and you could decide, no, I really need to keep work here. I'm going to need to concentrate on work during work. I'm going to need to do this after hours. And it is possible to do that. You're not going to be as efficient as normally. And there is a certain skill involved. I call it a sprint. It's when you do work knowing that you're going to be experiencing a kind of a low level of frustration and discomfort in doing it. But you kind of say, yes, I accept that. I'm not going to suppress that. And this is very important. You kind of get your head around the fact that doing this work is actually what you rationally think is more important. And you do that without suppressing the other stuff. And you can actually do work under really quite stressful situations. But it's a skill. It's a learnable skill. But the big point is, what you do in that moment depends on your values, your skills. That's why you need to stop and actually do the introspection and assess the situation, and then make a decision about what you're going to do now. And the take what you want and pay for it is very relevant here, right? You might decide to do the work and it might have a bad effect on the relationship. You might decide to take time off from work to work on the relationship. It might have a bad effect on work. When you're in a bad situation, part of what you need to do is you need to face the reality that these two things are in conflict, and you're going to choose the one that you think is in your rational self-interest, and you recognize the other one is less important and could be harmed. And that is the decision that you're making. And doing that with your eyes open is not fun. It's not pleasant, but it is an act of integrity, and it also insulates you, or inoculates you is a better word, so that if something bad does happen, you have, kind of the moral certainty that you did what you thought was right, and that you had accepted that this consequence might happen. It still is painful, but it going in with your eyes open is the critical thing.
Yep.
Eyes open to the values.
All right. Lincoln also asks, let's see, this is a long question. What are the best strategies for balancing career ambitions and family personal goals? For context, I'm a college student studying finance who wants to work in the tech VC factor as my career, but I'm worried that will conflict with my goals of having a family, which I find just as important to me. I don't want to sacrifice the opportunity to work on and invest in disruptive technologies for a 9-to-5 job, but the tech hustle culture feels hostile to the lifestyle that involves having a family and being involved with your kids' lives. Most of the kids of tech employees were more raised by nannies. instead of their own parents because they were so focused on work, they would rather hear another pitch deck than see their kid's baseball game.
So, it's good to know that you care about both of these things. And this means you're going to need to develop some skills, right? You're going to need to develop incredible skills so that you can work very productively during your productive hours, and that you can put in place things so that you can carve out time for your kids. There are entrepreneurs who completely successfully do this, and it takes skills. And so if you want both, this is an example of another example of take what you want and pay for it. You need to recognize that you're going to go in there and you're going to need to work out the third way. And you're going to need to find some role models. You've got some anti-role models. Sure, of course, there are people who have totally screwed this up.
Yep.
That's not hard to find. But there are positive role models. I think of one of my good friends from MIT. His father was in the music business. And there were a lot of screwed up people in the music business, but his family, my friend's family, husband, wife, 2 kids, absolute loving, happy family, totally stable. I mean, he was a role model for all kinds of people. He was unusual, but he was a role model. And I'm sure you can find, this is worth actually researching. Research tech people or entrepreneurs who really figured out how to prioritize a family and have a great family.
Yep.
It's a solvable. If something matters to you, the assumption needs to be that it's a solvable problem. Now, if this is a very specific thing because this fellow is still a college student, right? He's not actually in the situation, and I assume he doesn't actually have a family yet. If he's college.
No,
student.
but I think he's got. I think he's got a girlfriend that they're planning to get married.
Great, that's wonderful, right?
Yep.
So, I have more of a pep talk than I have an answer, because I think the answer is going to be very specific.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing too is that as he gets involved, right, when they talk about the hustle culture, some people treat it as you just have to work like I did, right? Like the way I worked when I first worked, I just worked, you have to do this and it doesn't matter how you feel. Well, you actually get a hell of a lot more done if you take the whole context of that the work has to pay off as you go, that you need to figure out how to work efficiently during this time, because you're not going to spend 12 hours to do something that if you really work efficiently, you can do in 6 hours, and that you put a boundary, and then you need to figure out how to put on social boundaries. So there are a lot of skills involved.
Yep.
And the way that you develop the skills is by first knowing that this is what you want, and then second, putting your brain on that. I realize it's a generic answer, but
it's good.
The devil is in the details on these things. And it is, I totally believe that that's possible.
Okay, Stringer Bell asks, hello, Jean. How does one stay committed to a goal? I find an individual can start out strong, but eventually something knocks them off track.
So I think the most common reason people get knocked off track is because they haven't figured out how to make sure that they're building in results as they go, and they're not actually seeing progress. Because if you see progress, you get more excited and you get more motivation. And so I think that this is people envision the goal and say, well, it's 10,000 steps. Let's get going. And they do the first 197 steps. And then they say, damn it, 197 steps. This is, this is like, what is this? 2% of the way there? Is my math correct? Damn it. I've been putting all this effort. Oh my God, when am I going to get there? All right, well, I've got to keep going. And they do another 120 steps. And it's like, oh my God, can I keep going? You can't have a goal that's a 10,000 steps until you get a payoff. And I actually think that, I mean, I use the term step for something that you can do in less than 2 hours. And I use the term key result for something you can do in less than 2 weeks, and the term objective for something that takes like 1 to 3 months, something like that. And you need a different kind of payoff in each of those. Like a task, you don't actually need to see progress toward the goal, but there needs to be some pleasure in it. Like you got to finish something, or you got to enjoy it, or something. Like if you have to play music to enjoy it, okay, that's what you do for the task. For the 2-week key result, you got to see this is moving me toward my goal. I'm getting some of the value out of the goal. And if you do that, you see, if you can make it so that you keep pulling this back, so it's a 2-week key result that you're actually like, wow, hey, I'm making progress. And then a 2-month objective where, hey, I've got a real result I can show people. And you keep iterating to do that, the momentum builds and you get more and more passionate about the goal as you go. The thing that kills passion is that you don't actually see results, and the goal is just something that is only in your imagination, and the only way you feed the value of the goal is in imagination. You've got to feed it with actual real world results, because that is how you program values. It's action that achieves a value is what strengthens a value.
Thanks, Stringer Bell. Jacob, can there be a misalignment between your rational goals and your personality that is insurmountable? For example, a goal requiring extreme extroversion and you aren't.
So I think personality, you should think of personality as just the things that you have skills at that you're comfortable with. And like extroversion, chatting up people and public speaking, for example. These are learnable skills. These are absolutely learnable skills. Now, it may be the case that, I mean, like, there may be temperament issues here, like that some people test out as introverts and it's a fairly stable characteristic versus extroverts. The thing that introverts find when they do social tasks is they get tired faster. Well, the reason they get tired faster is because it requires more active monitoring and more, it's not a totally automatized familiar skill that has values. But if it's important enough, you can make it be a bigger skill. And if it's not pleasurable, if you can't make the extroverted work pleasurable, then you'll find some way to adjust that goal a little bit so that it has less of that and it has more of whatever it is that you do find pleasurable. So, for example, I don't think introverts have trouble doing Zoom calls. Whereas public speaking, where they actually have people that they need to talk to in person, that's more tiring. You may be able to achieve the same thing that allegedly takes an extroverted skill, but you may be able to find a way that is more adapted to your introverted capabilities. But you don't have to. You can develop any skill you want. I think that is the important attitude to have. If some people can do it, actually, if a lot of people can do it, it's a learnable skill. It's not deterministic.
Okay, Hugh McKenzie asks, any thoughts on token economies? Are they effective? That is, rewarding desired behavior with tokens, which can be exchanged for other reinforcers.
So this is a new one on me, but generally speaking, if this would be a second-handed economy, meaning that someone decides what behavior should be reinforced, and they try to treat the people like animals by giving them rewards for things that they want them to do. So I'm not in favor of such a thing, and I think it is true that external rewards, if you are passive and you choose what you do based on what other people want you to do, and you get your pleasure from rewards that other people give you, that is a second-handed life. It puts you completely at the mercy of other people. It makes you a victim or wanting to have power over other people. It's for the birds. If you choose to pursue values because they are important to you, this stuff is all irrelevant. So, did I address the question here? Maybe you know more about.
I think you did, but then how would you treat, I don't know, different bonus schemes at work, which are very similar, or like stock options? You know, you make a lot of money if this is successful. I mean, those do have a motivating factor for people. They're not neutral.
Right. Well, part of what you're trying to do here is you're trying to align the person's self-interest with the business's self-interest, right?
Yeah.
And but how do I say this? So one thing I didn't say, so I will make clear that I did not say that external rewards don't work in a lot of cases. They do work in a lot of cases. And something like that where you align the the bonuses are aligned with the company's goals.
Yeah.
A person could be doing that for second-hand reasons or for first-hand reasons.
But there is an option of first-hand reasons, right?
There is an option of first-hand reason, because part of what this does is this like grabs your attention and says, hey, this is what the company goal is. And this is how we're trying to get the company goal. And this is your part in trying to get the company goal. And this is, you actually really see, and if you are smart and you want to get that money, you really figure out how to get the company to be successful. Yep. Now, that assumes that the company is managed rationally and that this bonus system is rational.
Sure.
And that they have a clear idea that they have a rational goal and they have a clear idea of how you're actually contributing to it. Now, I think there's some very clever people at some companies that really do figure that out. Mm-hmm. And I think at some companies it becomes a game. Yep. And people game the system and it totally backfires because they do the thing to get the bonus, not to make the company successful.
Yep.
So So it could be rational, but. Yep.
This is Adam says, as Ayn Rand wrote, value deprivation is general to the whole of our culture.
Yeah.
This minding is specific to the progressive anti-philosophy of education. Of course, the whole of the culture is reflected in education. Please comment.
How true. What can I say?
Yeah.
It's absolutely true.
Dean agrees with you, Adam.
Was that Adam Reed?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right. Egupto asks, on ambition, is it a trait one embodies or a trait of one's goals? Is it a virtue? How does it relate to rationality or productiveness? Okay.
It's not a trait. If trait normally is used to mean something that's like a part of you. I think it's a characteristic of a goal, and so it's a goal is ambitious if it is something that is a little beyond your skill level. That would make a goal an ambitious goal. As far as whether it's a virtue or not, this is what we were talking about. I think pride is a virtue, right? Moral ambitiousness is a virtue. And I think because growth is rational and so important to life, I think ambitiousness is also, I think it would be generally under the heading of pride, but it's a little broader than moral ambitiousness. It's self-improvement in any area it's going to help grow your skills, give you more capabilities, make you more able to succeed in the world.
And she asks, how does it relate to rationality or productiveness?
So it relates to productiveness because it definitely relates to goals. I'd say ambitiousness is an issue of your goals. right? What is it that you're trying to do? Goals are you set the goal of what you want to achieve in the future, and then you act to create that out in the world. And so it's built into productiveness. I mean, you can be productive without being ambitious, in the sense that you can, like a janitor, right? That Ayn Rand uses the example of a janitor as being kind of at the bottom of the pyramid of ability, right? But if you sweep the floor every day, that is a productive undertaking. That is actually something that needs to be done, that does contribute, and you get paid for that, right? But there's no growth involved in that, and there's no learning involved in that. Although there could be an ambitious janitor who's always figuring out the better way to clean things and what's the better product. So you could imagine an ambitious janitor. I don't want to knock janitors. So it's not inherent in productiveness, but it is inherent in any kind of large-scale productive achievement, let's put it that way. And it's inherent in a central purpose, right? So in that sense, it is inherent in the virtue of productiveness. If you have a central purpose, this is a long-range goal. By definition, you can't achieve it right now. It's going to require a sustained effort over a long time. So it is an ambitious goal just by its very nature.
Yep.
Now, how does it relate to rationality? Well, in the same way goals relate to rationality. They need to be based on reality. They need to be based on standards of what is good for human life. So it's the standard by which you, or the means by which you vet everything that you do, and you make sure that the goal is set in some kind of a reasonable way.
So Noak says, big fan of Jean. I really recommend people check out her services.
Thank you.
Mary Eileen says, Jean, thanks so much for the recommendation of the book, The Practicing Mind. I've read about half of it, and I love it.
Yes, it's a short read, and it really was a delight when I discovered this a couple weeks ago.
All right, here's Boaz's multi-pronged question. You can choose what you want to answer of this, because there's a lot here. How can parents of toddlers exceed career goals? What roles will humans have if AI robotics take most jobs? Your take on New York City, Bitcoin, Trump, and Musk.
All right, let's take the first. Let's just kind of do them in order. I'll just tell you what I can about them. Okay, toddlers and a career. Is that the question?
And a career goal. Exceed career goals. I mean, that's the question you did before, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, presumably, if you have a toddler and you have a career goal, you have figured out, who is taking care of the toddler when you're working, right? So part of it is being incredibly efficient at work. I mean, this is something I've coached people on, is how do you make sure that you get out of work at 6 o'clock or whatever it is, whatever is the reasonable time, so that you actually get home for dinner and, to spend the time with the kid before the kid needs to go to sleep. That's a skill. That's setting a boundary. You need to be able to say no to people, because people will come into your office 10 minutes before you plan to leave. And you need social skills to be able to do that. You also need productivity skills, because you need to be able to finish things up at the end of the day and not see an email and then say, oh, why don't I just quickly answer that and have, 45 minutes go by. That, there's real self-awareness and real very conscious decision-making and prioritization required to be able to put those boundaries on work and home, and to make sure that you are ultra productive during work. But this is so I'm going to sing the same song. It's learnable skills.
Yep.
And then I also think that celebration, right? It's because if you're working hard and you got a 2-year-old, now we did not have children. So I don't have first-hand experience of this, but I've had some experience with 2-year-olds. And they're a lot of fun, right? And so make sure that you actually really enjoy that experience with the kid. And that also is going to take discipline, because you're going to be tired.
Mhm.
And you're going to need to actually learn how to, get in the zone and have a good rapport, and also still have boundaries with the kid, because you don't want to spoil the kid because you don't spend time with it. You're going to need to learn a lot of skills, and it is going to be worth it. Every skill you learn is going to improve your relationship with your children, relationship with your spouse, and your productivity at work.
All right. Andrew asks, aside from the obvious, why can losing a parent be so grief-inducing? What are some keys to recovering from that grief?
I don't know why we need to go aside from the obvious.
Yeah.
I think the obvious is obvious and is real. So, and I just want to say, I don't mind talking about some of Boaz's other things, but let me stay on this one, on the grief thing.
Stay on this one.
Yeah. So here is the one thing that is aside from the obvious. I really experienced this when I lost my father. He had been watching out for me my whole life. My whole life. And then he wasn't there. And you cannot be aware of that. You cannot make the differentiation. Maybe if someone had, maybe my telling you this, some young people who still have their father can say, oh, that's true. My father is doing that for me. And that's right. If he's gone, he won't be. And you may be able to visualize it. I don't know. But a lot of times the things that you know about the value of your parents is because of the differentiations that you saw. And so you were able to conceptualize them. So like when I went to camp, I went to overnight camp, and I never felt homesick except the one year that my mother was in the hospital. My mother almost died that summer, actually. And thank goodness she didn't, because I would have been in camp in Maine, my world was out of whack because I literally, this is like my 7th year of camp. Prior to that, my mother or my father had written me a letter every day that I was at camp. But because my mother was sick, they didn't do that. And it was missing. And it was really it really shook me up. But I had that, sometimes you're able to conceptualize things because the world gave you the differentiation. There is no differentiation of dad not looking out for me until he dies. And then you get that differentiation and you can see it. And there are going to be things like that you took them for granted. There's a sense in which your parents create the universe that you live in. They literally created the house. They set up the house. They set the ground rules. And, this is something, as you age, you discover there are things that you take for granted that other people don't. Like, to take an example, in my household, it was pretty normal to yell at each other. And that doesn't bother me. But it turns out that in a lot of households, this is like not done. This is not done. And it's like a really big deal if you raise your voice. And I'm like, what? What's your problem? And, this is the kind of thing that you kind of have to get out of it to be able to see. And that's one of the things, that is the not obvious part of why losing your parents are hard, is that there are a whole bunch of things like this that you discover, and it takes work to actually name them, which gets to what can you do about it. Put the time into conscious mourning, mourning. This means that you literally spend, say, a half hour a day. I would do it in journaling, in writing in a journal. The process that I recommend is something I call an empathy bath. It's in my Thinker's Toolkit, which is a little, a $20 PDF you can get from me. And you go through your emotions and why do I feel this, and about the parent that you lost, right? And you do that each day, or then one day you maybe reminisce about them, and then you go through, you introspect your emotions and what do they mean. And if you do this proactively, if you spend some time every day doing this, you will work through all of the issues gradually. And you'll get some very deep insights. You will feel closer. I mean, there are certain ways in which I feel closer to my mother now than I did before she died. I mean, I actually, after she died, I got an appreciation for her independence and her judgment that I just didn't have when she was alive. And I got an appreciation for something that I was totally oblivious to, is how she actually created communities where she went, which I still am benefiting from, actually. I mean, it's a long story, but and part of how you deal with the mourning is by loving the parent and learning the ways in which you love the parent very explicitly, so that when that parent crosses your mind, what you feel is love for them, and love for what you learned from them, and love for what you got for them, and love for how you've taken that and put it into your life now. And that is part of what heals the loss.
Right. Neo asks, I've struggled in school and haven't been able to advance my job. I'm in my early 30s and not having felt success. My mind has a hard time trying new things. I avoid many opportunities due to the fear of failing. Any advice?
Well, I heard all of the things that are bad, but I didn't hear something that you actually want to do. And that is the critical thing. What do you kind of wish you could do? And why do you wish it? Right? And part of, you don't wish for something unless you've got some capabilities in that area. They may be very meager, but you can't even envision doing something without some awareness of the means whereby it can be achieved. And so you've got to start with what you want. The more you focus on the problems, the difficulties, the past difficulties, that will suck you into a vicious cycle of despair. It will absolutely stop you even from naming what it is that you'd like to do. So it's a little hard. I mean, obviously you've got 3 sentences in this question, and I hate people who psychologize, right? So I'm not going to make a statement about what's going on with you. And if you're really feeling down, I would start with the 3 good things that I mentioned earlier in the call. Start writing 3 good things and make it be 3 things I achieved yesterday. And start actually noticing what you are doing right and what you like about what you're doing right, and use that to help you start seeing what it is that you want to do more of. Because that's where it's going to start. It's going to start with something that you want, and then probably one of the basic skills is the value orientation. This is something that I teach, right? I mean, I'm not the only person who teaches it, but this is the kind of thing I teach. Maintaining that value orientation, maintaining a focus on, this is what I'm going for. Yes, this is an obstacle. What am I going to do about this obstacle? Because I want that. Maintaining that. How do I get that? Okay, so there's an issue here. Let's figure out a way around that to get what I want. To maintain that positive, forward-looking attitude, that is a skill. But the short version of it is, every time you have a threat-oriented emotion, fear, anger, guilt, despair, frustration, introspect it, identify the values at stake, try to go after those values.
Thanks, Neo. Friend Harper says, great episode. You are my favorite guest.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you.
Andrew says, my reference to Brandon's essay on pleasure was in contrast to the arbitrary value of pain from religion. I know a few serious Jews who want to feel guilty and sadness as proof of virtue, and they do.
That's so sad. Yeah, that's so sad.
So prevalent, though.
Yeah.
All right, Lincoln, any tips on developing intrinsic motivations when working? A lot of my motivations to work hard are external. For example, good class grades, money for my job. This won't be effective in the workplace, especially at a startup where there are no A's and the monetary payoff is delayed. Great
Right.
interview, by the way.
Thank you. So, throw out the term intrinsic motivation. What you want is you want passion for the work you're doing. So the word you want is passion. So like suppose you're taking a class and you're taking it because it's a required course and you want to get an A because you want to get into whatever program you want to get into. You got to find something interesting about this class and or about this topic. And suppose you have to write a paper for it. You need to, actually start looking for what interests you and building up that interest. And that would be if it's a subject, right? Like the way you get passionate about a subject is you learn more about it and you do your own firsthand integration of it. And you say, well, how will this help me? Like you have real goals, right? So how is this going to help me with a goal? Sometimes that takes creative thinking. But, if you ask Lisa Van Dam, she can tell you how any piece of literature can help you with your goals. So if you have to read literature, you can figure that out. You can figure out a connection. Or if you're studying history, you can figure out a connection. And that work that you do to connect it to your actual goals, that will make it more interesting. So that's how you could do it with a topic. Now, suppose you have to learn, like you have to take a math class. There it's a skill. And there what you want to do is you want to try to figure out what is the basic thing you're learning and get good at it. Because when you get good at a skill, you like it more because there's an efficacy involved there. And so there it's probably the KISSS where you need to find out, like with calculus. I'm just making up something. I haven't thought about calculus in a long time, so I'm not sure this is going to work. But something I never did. So this is do as I say, not as I do. But, there are a lot of things I would do differently if I knew then what I know now. Just as an example, when I was in college, they would let us have a cheat sheet. So we could bring in, what all the integrals were or whatever, so that you didn't have to memorize them. But I'll tell you, you'll be way better at calculus if you memorize all the basic ones. Memorize and get so that you can use them without having to look them up. That'll make everything easier. And so choosing something that you can learn that's a building block that's going to make it be easier and make it easier to add on and easier to remember other things makes a big difference. I was a tutor to make some money. When I first started my business, I actually tutored a couple of kids in my building who were in like first grade, second grade. And the older boy was having such trouble in math. And I was helping him with his homework, and I realized he didn't have memorized the single digit addition facts or the single digit multiplication facts. So his mother and I decided over the summer, she gave him a page of addition facts, single digit, addition facts, subtraction facts, multiplication, and division. And he drilled that over the summer. He did a page of each of those every day for the whole summer. He went to the top of his class in math the next year. So there's always something. So if you really want to have passion for the subject, it's going to be knowledge and values. Deepen your knowledge, connect it to your values. Deepen your skill and connect it to your values. That's what I would say.
All right, this is the last question, also from Lincoln. 100% agree on making sure can handle young kids before having them. My parents are friends with a couple of 20 years their junior. We have a little 2-year-old toddler who I have had the chance to spend time with and babysit with my girlfriend. And the adults are out of town, super informative to us, ahead of time before marriage and children.
Great.
No question there. Thanks, Lincoln.
Great. Terrific.
Well, thanks, Jean.
Well, thank
Almost
you,
3 hours.
Yaron.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thanks, you guys. Thanks all the super chatters. That was great.
Yeah,
Thanks for all the question.
Interesting questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Put me on my toes. And thanks for the discussion, Yaron. You know, when I got a little stopped, I threw it back at you and we had a good discussion.
What I'm here for. It was good. We'll talk about revenge another time.
We'll talk about revenge, maybe at Rand's Day. We'll talk about
Maybe.
revenge. I'll think about it between now and then.
Good. All right, everybody. I'll see all you guys tomorrow for our new show, and I'll see you, Jean, at Wednesday.
Great.
Bye,
Thanks a lot.
everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.